Hi there, I'm Christine Zips, founder of Wired Schools Group and Zips Media. And today I'm very honored to have as our guest Tom Kersting. And if I may read a little bit of it about his bio so I get it right, it's very impressive. Tom is one of the most sought after experts in the field of mental health, families, parenting in the digital age, and over device use, as he provides advice to millions of people through regular television appearances, radio and print media, books, and private sessions. He is a straight shooter and passionate about helping families, whether in crisis or just in disaccord. Tom holds advanced degrees, including a bachelor's degree in psychology from St. Thomas Aquinas College, a master's degree in counseling and human development, and a second master's in administration and supervision, both from Montclair State University. Tom also holds a PhD in clinical hypnotherapy from Kona University. Tom is also a former semi-professional baseball player, avid golfer, and dedicated to fitness. So welcome to you, Tom. What an impressive credentials. I would rather talk about, golf and baseball, but we have a very important work that you've done. I'm reading your book, Disconnected. That's just fantastic. And, I'd love for you to tell us what led you to the path, and specifically, our first topic here is how electronic devices are impacting kids' brains.
Yeah, so my career, I've worked at a public high school for 25 years. I just retired early. I did my 25 years, and as of January 31st, I retired from the school I worked at. And for 20 years, I was working at the school as a counselor and doing my private practice. So I would leave the school every day and then go to my private practice, pretty much working 12 hours a day. But what got me into this topic was back in September of 2008. I talk about this at my lectures and in the book and so forth. I used to run a committee called the 504 committee in the high school. And 504 is an accommodation plan that kids may be eligible for if they have some form of a disability. And September 2008, and pretty much the types of disabilities that we'd see over the years were things like Crohn's disease, diabetes, sometimes physical disabilities, things of that nature. And essentially, if a kid had any of those, they might be eligible for accommodations protected under 504. So September 2008, we had our first parent meeting of the year. Parents have to come meet with our committee to see if their kid has some kind of disability and express why they believe that's impacting them educationally. And parent had come in and said, yeah, my son has been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And I remember just being puzzled by that because, 14 or 15 years old is not when you get attention deficit disorder. You're born with it. And the average age of diagnosis is 8 years old. And for any parent, you kind of can't not notice if your child has attention deficit disorder by age 5 even. So here we had this student, and long story short, that point on, the remainder of that school year, almost every referral to our 504 committee was for kids diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And I contacted colleagues of mine, and every other school was seeing the same thing. And I was the only one questioning this, in my mind at least, like, what is going on here? It's not something you just get at 14 or 15. So that's what led me to a lot of the researching what potentially might be going on. And I came across some really compelling research suggesting that too much screen time for kids, even back then in 2009, was changing their brain and creating symptoms of attention deficit disorder, even though the kids didn't actually have attention deficit disorder. And one of the researchers coined a term that he referred to as acquired ADHD. And that's how I got into this.
One thing that I have heard about is that with the ADHD, and I read so much, and forgive me that I'm not able to say exactly the source of what I wanted to share, but I heard that if a child is on a cell phone conversation, holding it to his head for only like 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, that it takes 2 hours or something for his brain to recalibrate to where he was before. And during that time, he's exhibiting symptoms of ADHD. And a lot of people, if they don't realize it, that they will misdiagnose a child with ADHD when they're just spending too much time on the phone.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you concentrate. But that is that not like what you've talked about with the neuroplasticity and the neural pruning, and where a brain literally changes. And you've told a story I'm reading in your book about where you were lecturing. I must admit that I laughed out loud because I've so seen this, where I believe you were lecturing to a group of ninth graders, and maybe you were talking about this in another section, but you said I was on top of my game. I had my energy. If it was a TED Talk, it'd probably go viral. I knew it was going well. But you said I looked out at the audience and they were like totally checked out, totally like, what's going on? You said it might be like I'm dangling a pocket watch in front of them, that they were just totally hypnotic. But is that all related to this same thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I talk about that in the book. So, I mean, that was at the high school that I worked at. I would do that every year. I would go into the classroom and talk to the phys ed, to the health classes, the physical education department would have me come to speak to every freshman health class, right? Over the course of a couple of weeks, there'd be, 9 of them. And, and it was always very engaging. And then this particular year, and I kind of chalked it up to the fact that this was probably about 2 years ago, that freshman group got their smartphones earlier than anybody, starting when they were probably 11 or 12 years old. So they had all these years of being hypnotized and their brain being changed. And I am lecturing in front of them, and what I see is, and plus they're not sleeping. That's a whole nother topic. That's part of it as well. But yeah, and from that point, while we're talking about the brain stuff, so neuroplasticity is the following, for those that don't know about it. So it's actually the greatest breakthrough in modern day psychology. And it essentially what it means is that the brain is malleable. The brain will adapt to any environment that it spends the most time in. So essentially neuroplasticity, if any brain that's involved in anything highly stimulating for 3 hours or more per day, the brain will change its circuitry. These are called neural pathways. They look like tree branches, by growing new ones. Okay. And we know, so that's 3 hours a day of anything considered very highly stimulating. And what we have now is that the average kid is spending approximately 9 hours a day, 3 times that amount, in the most stimulating world that there is. And their brains are adapting to the cyber world and unadapting to the real world. Something more frightening than neuroplasticity is neural pruning. Any of the pathways aren't being utilized, and we need, every one of these pathways plays a pivotal role in our life. One for communication, one to be able to listen, one to be able to focus, blah, blah, blah. The brain will prune those away. And as far as the acquired ADHD is concerned, what's occurring is that these kids it's estimated about 70% of kids that are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder later don't actually have it. They have a brain that mimics the symptoms: inattentiveness, lack of focus, disorganization, and so forth. And it's because of the stimulating nature of 9 hours a day staring at all this entertaining stuff. And now when they have to sit and look at Mrs. Smith or Tom Kersting lecture in front of them, they're like, whoop, out in outer space, because that's how the brain is adapted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's amazing. And it seems like their attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. I'm currently, I believe I've shared, I'm doing a little bit of support homeschooling for a dear friend's 7-year-old, and it's wonderful. But just to observe her behavior, her attention span, she's brilliant. She's so bright, so eager to learn, so curious, wonderful to work with. But I find that I have to say, okay, so let's put this aside and let's take a look at this now, or let's get up and do some jumping jacks, because I kind of see her going, kind of checking out mentally. And I said, okay. And it's quite the education for me in doing this, but I also feel good that I'm kind of saving one child from the government school with so much that's going on there, as you know, and that's kind of why we're doing this, but it's really gratifying. But so, anything more that you'd like to share on this topic from, I think you've covered the cyberspace children and... Yeah,
I'll talk about the mental health real quick.
Right, okay.
So I had mentioned, just a little while ago about the 504 committee I used to run with just about every referral back at that point being kids with attention deficit disorder. That shifted, by the way, about 4 or 5 years after that. Let me think when that was, 2000, probably a little after 2012, where now the number one referral we had at that committee starting in around 2012 was anxiety disorders. And I go into that in detail in the book. The first edition of my book, which came out December 2016, there was no research had been done on anything I was claiming, connecting anxiety and depression to the amount of time kids are spending on screens. Since then, the research has come out, and it's in the new edition of the book. So it's supported by that, because that was always the question. Well, where's the research? First of all, I don't trust researchers anymore anyway, because they could do whatever they want. You know what I mean? Not every researcher, but it's like everybody's like, well, where's the research? Well, the researchers come follow me every day for a week, and then you won't need to do any research.
There you go. Well, especially statistics, right? Those are pretty easy to fudge, right? I understand.
Yeah, you can create any statistic you want. You know what I mean? But yeah. But anyway, now the researchers have done and shown that all this stuff has to do with it, and it's pretty clear, really, when you think about it. You take a vulnerable pre-adolescent, 12, 13-year-old, maybe even earlier. And they're all just adolescence by itself is a time of insecurity, figuring out who you are, right? And it's a difficult stage for kids, as they transition through puberty and their voices are changing, their looks are changing, trying to figure out where they fit in. Once they get these phones and so forth, they're now relinquishing their schoolwork. They don't know they're doing so. Falling back behind in school, the tension starts in the household, and it's an everyday thing. And then they start using social media and comparing themselves to everybody else. And then they have to post things in order to get likes, and it gets streaks, and it's artificially filling their self-esteem, because it's not filling their self-esteem. It's actually removing their self-esteem.
Isn't it a dopamine hit that they get every time they get that ding?
Every little alert. Sure. Yeah. It triggers, and it's designed that way by the tech industry. Right. That's why we have all these things. Mm-hmm. So that you have to immediately see that, you feel noticed, and you got to go, look, oh my God, somebody's reaching out to me. Oh wow, somebody just liked my Instagram post. And this is for kids in the most people in the most vulnerable developmental stage, when they're pre-adolescents and adolescents, when they're already insecure. And now we could dive right in there with all these alerts and get them sucked right in, and it creates all of these mental health issues. Comparing stuff to other, and just digesting all of the crazy information going on in our world. On top of that, it's a perfect storm, really, going on with kids in terms of the mental health crisis we have.
A downward spiral, and we have the cyber addicted children of cyber addicted parents, and who maybe could be doing a little better with their role modeling and things like that. But not here to scold anyone, but just because I truly believe that they don't understand the harm that is being done, and that it's cumulative. So mm-hmm. This just keeps building and building. Like Camilla Rees, she was back in 2017, I co-sponsored an event called Screen Time in Schools, Why Parents Should Care. And we were able to feature a panel of 5 experts, including Dr. Victoria Dunckley and Camilla Rees, and talking about addiction and data mining and all of these aspects there. But as you probably know, with Dr. Victoria Dunckley and her book, How to Reset Your Child's Brain, mm-hmm. That she talks about her digital detox, where you just remove those devices, all of them, cold turkey. I think she talks about 4 weeks to just absolutely, and it's not easy. And because it's an addiction, there are the withdrawals, and it's not pretty. It's hard. It's very difficult for the family. And I heard she did an intervention for a family where she had the parents put the devices away. I think they locked them up in a drawer or whatever, but the kids found a way to get them back. They were so addicted that they literally had to take them out of the house into a storage unit and lock it up, so they had no idea where they were to have it work. But it had a happy outcome that the kids, after they went through their ugly phase of being so distressed, and the family went along for the ride with it, but they rediscovered nature. They discovered that the kids like to play with one another. We have a slide, we have swings in the backyard. Wow, and they did board games, and it just had a happy story. So I love that. So that was pretty amazing. Yeah. So. Well, what we're doing, Tom, with your permission today, is that we are creating a little mini series. So, with this first group having this first topic having to do with the impact of electronic devices on the kids' brains, anything else you'd like to add under this category?
Yeah, I'll talk real quickly about multitasking.
Take your,
Okay. Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So multitasking is task switching. It's moving from one platform to the next simultaneously. So, for example, if you're watching television and you got your laptop on your lap and you got your phone next to you and you're going back and forth, you're dividing your attention among different platforms. And if you ask anybody that does a lot of multitasking, they're going to tell you that they're really good at it. Okay. But all the research out there shows that the higher the level of multitasking, the more lousy you actually are at it. And some of the stuff I've referenced in the book is a former professor who passed away, unfortunately, out of Stanford by the name of Clifford Nass, who did some pretty cool little experiments with some of his students. And, at the end of these experiments, he would have them do a little slideshow, count how many times a red rectangle moves. And then there are blue ones added in there and so forth. It's in the book. I talk about it. And, what he discovered is that the students that were high multitaskers couldn't do the task because they got too distracted by these blue rectangles. The low multitaskers did it effortlessly. And then what he did is he did the same experiment with two different groups and used a portable MRI device. And this is when it got pretty bad, pretty eye-opening. While these kids were doing the experiment, the low multitaskers on this when it was looking at their brains on a screen, showed that they were using just a small area of their executive function part of their brain. That's the part that was illuminating, which is supposed to happen. And then when he went to the high multitaskers and they did the same experiment, about 20 times more brain power was showing up on those on the slides that he was looking, not the slide, the actual image of each kid's brain. And what was more profound was that it was the wrong part of the brain that was illuminating. It was their visual cortex. So from all of this chronic multitasking, the brains of these kids attempted to reconfigure itself. But if you know anything about the brain, the visual cortex can't sit and listen to a teacher in your classroom. That's what your executive functions are for. And you have to wonder regarding all the ADHD stuff I just talked about, does that have anything to do with it? And the answer is, of course it does. Yeah. So what I was mentioning is that research done by Clifford Nass and, doing these experiments with students at Stanford University. And conclusively it showed that, the more you multitask, the less you're getting done in life. And one of the issues now, while we're at this with COVID, with the schools right now, with kids being online, New York City just shut the schools down. I know I think in Michigan they did, California. I just did a segment yesterday, two of them yesterday, one for Brian Kilmeade's radio show and then on Fox and Friends, the early one, talking about that, giving my insight. Now, and I think it's terrible personally because, you have a 99.98% or likelihood that nothing's going to happen to the kids. But what is, what as far as COVID is concerned, but what is happening is that it's affecting these kids substantially, emotionally, mentally, and so forth, and academically. Now, how does that relate to multitasking? So one thing that I've discovered since COVID started from counseling so many kids is that what most of them do, and I mean, and most of them probably being 90% middle school and high school kids, is while they're in their bedrooms, doing their Zoom classroom, like what you and I are doing right now, their phones are next to them. And they're getting interrupted, like they always do, every 10 seconds, every 5 seconds from some alert that they're getting. And the moment they look away, like I am right now, you cannot hear what the teacher just said. Your brain is incapable of doing two things at once. Right. So kids are struggling. So any parent listening right now, the advice I would give is get the phone out, not just out of their bedroom while they're doing school, make sure it's not in the same zip code. Mm-hmm. because they're going to find that thing and it's impacting them. Yeah.
Exactly. I was interviewing some teachers too, and they said that without a doubt, the most distracting element they have, a challenge of teaching in their classrooms these days, is a distraction from the kids' phones. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, here's a clue, teacher. Don't let them have them there. You know, even if they're allowed to bring them inside the schools, you know, have them leave it in a basket on airplane mode or off, and they can get it on their way back out. But you need their undivided attention. You
Yeah,
deserve it, you know.
of
So
course.
yeah,
In the classroom, actually in the classroom, not Zoom, but like real classrooms, what a lot of teachers are doing now is they put those shoe, those cloth shoe racks that you can hang like over the door, and kids
right.
have their phones in there when they go
Oh,
into.
that would be good. That
The
would be
ideal
good.
situation, if I was the superintendent of any public school, I would ban phones from entering the school. And I know I get a
Absolutely.
tremendous amount of blowback. Bring it on. I would do it
Ab-
anyway. It's the right thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think some schools even have, well, they're like lockers or whatever, but they're where they can be locked up and they're all protected. I guess it's almost like a Faraday cage sort of thing for the phones for the kids. I don't know.
Yeah, they're called yonder cases.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yes, I've heard about that, and that sounds good. And you know, we were talking if we could. I wanted to ask you about COVID and being a psychotherapist and knowing I have a dabbled a little bit in college in psychology classes. I was just because I was so interested in it. I was fascinated by how people learn, but knowing what's going on in schools with the masks, the temperature checks, aiming that gun, you know, and what does that do to a kid psychologically, where a taller, usually adult, is aiming that gun at their
Yeah.
pineal gland, and doesn't that kind of potentially calcify or whatever? But the gun, I mean, how can that make the kid feel just psychologically what that might represent? And they want to be with their friends, and they can't hug them. They can't be closer than 6 feet. And how distracted are the teachers saying, "Oh, Johnny, you're getting too close to Billy over there. You better do this and that." And you know, psychologically, isn't on top of everything else, what does that do to the children? And also, I understand with remote learning, our grandchildren are 12 and 15, and they're in New England, they're in New Hampshire, and they're getting tons of extra homework, more than they say they got when they went into the schools for classes. They're getting more through the computer and wireless and all that device, and it just makes me crazy. And I've suggested to my daughter-in-law, and she's an IT person, I said, can you not make sure that at least that they're wired what they're learning on? And she said, no, that would disrupt, we couldn't download the program from the school if they weren't using the wireless. I don't know how that works, but what's my question? Psychological impacts from COVID on top of everything else, and also from being even remote learning. What is that doing to our children's brains?
Well, especially the younger kids, what it's doing to them now is it's removing the most important developmental component of their life, which is social emotional. Just being in the presence of other kids, running outside and playing, making shapes out of clouds and things like that. That's, for children, socializing and interacting and playing is their natural habitat. So it would be the equivalent of taking a lion out of the tundra and putting it in a cage. That's what's happening with kids. And the mask wearing, I get it. And maybe, I don't get it, to be honest with you. I'll be quite blunt, the whole mask thing.
Like trying to keep mosquitoes out with chain link fence.
The whole mask thing, it's like, all right, everybody wear a mask. And I hear if masks work, I hear they don't work. I don't even know what to believe anymore, but I do know that because if the numbers have gone up, then I guess they don't work. So, the mask, the problem I have with the mask is it creates a de-individualization.
Right.
All right. So, human beings, when they do interact, if you're interacting with a mask, you're not interacting because we communicate more. Verbal communication is the smallest part of our communication. It's the nonverbal, the nuanced stuff, the facial expressions. And if you can't see any of that, we're not honing in and reading, what and learning about the human connection that we evolve as human beings, that we develop, and we don't even know we're developing it, unconsciously. So I am worried about that. Now, my son, who's 17 years old, He's an excellent student. He's a very responsible kid. His school, public school out here, really, really top public high school. They had a stage, the stage thing, like phase one, I think it was, starting in September. A third of the kids will be in, and then you're at home 2 days in a row, and then you're in home 2 days, in school half a day. So right before they got to phase two, which was every other day, 50%, they had two cases. Somebody's great grandmother's mom's sister somewhere, whatever it was. So by New Jersey state law, they now had to shut the school down for 14 days and do all online. Okay. And my son's fine. I mean, he's mature. He's 17. He's a good student. So he's okay doing the online. So they were supposed to go, after the 2 weeks of being, I guess, quarantining and being at home, upon return, they had to start at phase one all over again. Okay. So my son says to me, he says, Dad, I think is it okay if I just do all online? Because this is getting ridiculous. I only go in once a week. I go in for a half a day. I got to sit there with a mask on. The teacher's not even teaching me. The teacher's looking at the computer, teaching the kids that are watching it. I got to wake up an hour earlier to get ready for school. And my initial reaction was, no, I want you going to school. And then I thought about it and I said, you know what, Matt? No, you can stay home. You're getting plenty of social interactions, out with his friends all day. They're out playing football right now. And he's not, and even when he is in school, he's not getting any social interaction because he's sitting there wearing a mask and you can't be near anybody. And it sounds depressing and imprisoning to me. And that's just my opinion. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad to hear that. And I saw your video on your website where you're talking about the children were playing in your backyard. You could hear them playing and everything. And that was so great. And that's true that they're not getting all of that. And good for you with your son, and good for your son on recognizing that it wasn't good for himself. So, yay, Matt. So that is great. Tom, any final word on this segment? And we're going to invite viewers to pick us up in part 2 and 3, and before we move on.